A billionaire mocked his wife, told her she would never be a mother, and threw her away for a younger woman who was already carrying his heir. 5 years later, she walked into his luxury wedding with triplets and a life he could never buy back. A beautiful story for my amazing family. God bless every single one of you. If you're new here, welcome. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you've been with me, you already know how much your comments mean. I'm here, I'm ready, and I love you all. Now let's begin. Some women simply aren't built to be mothers. Jonathan Douglas said it calmly, like he was reading stock prices. Like he wasn't standing in front of 50 people at a rooftop restaurant with the Manhattan skyline glittering behind him. Like his wife of 8 years wasn't sitting 3 feet away in the dress she'd bought specifically for their anniversary, still believing this was a surprise celebration. Kelly had spent hours getting ready. She'd curled her hair the way he used to say he liked it. She'd worn the pearl earrings he'd given her on their first anniversary, back when he still touched her face like she was something precious. She'd walked into that private restaurant genuinely thinking her husband had finally remembered what they used to be. Instead, she'd walked into her own execution. "I've tried," Jonathan continued, his voice carrying across the silent room, across the stopped forks and the frozen smiles and the phones that were already recording. "God knows I've tried to make this marriage work. But there comes a point when a man has to think about his legacy, his future, his bloodline." 8 years. Kelly had given him 8 years. 8 years of injections and procedures, and hope and loss. 3 miscarriages. 3 babies she'd named in her heart before they ever drew breath. 3 times she'd bled and wept and blamed her own body, while Jonathan stood at a distance, checking his phone, already mentally calculating whether she was worth the investment. "The prenuptial agreement was very clear," he said, adjusting his cufflink with the same precision he used for everything: contracts, acquisitions, discarding women who'd served their purpose. "Kelly will be well taken care of. She'll have enough to start over somewhere. Appropriate." Appropriate. The words sliced through her chest. She watched his mother nod approvingly from the corner of the room. She watched board members she'd hosted at dinner parties avoid her eyes. She watched her entire world tilt sideways as Jonathan gestured toward the elevator and a woman stepped out. Young, beautiful, one hand resting on her stomach in that protective way Kelly recognized instantly because she'd done it herself, 3 times, before her body betrayed her. "This is Chloe," Jonathan said, and his voice finally held something warm. "My executive assistant. She's 12 weeks pregnant with my son, the heir I've been waiting for." Kelly couldn't breathe. The room had gone completely silent except for the faint clink of someone setting down a glass. She could feel every eye in the room on her, pitying, curious, relieved it wasn't them. "Jonathan," her voice came out broken, barely a whisper. "Please, we can try again. There are specialists we haven't seen. There are options." "I don't want options." He finally looked at her, and his eyes held nothing. No love, no regret, not even cruelty, just the bored irritation of a man whose meeting was running long. "I want results. I want a legacy. And you've proven, repeatedly, that you're incapable of giving me either." "I lost our children." The words ripped out of her, raw and bleeding. "3 of them. Do you remember holding me in the hospital? Do you remember telling me we'd get through it together? I remember wasting years on something that was never going to work." Jonathan picked up the divorce papers from the table, already signed on his side, already prepared by lawyers who'd been planning this for months while she was picking out anniversary gifts. "My attorneys have been generous. You have 30 days to vacate the penthouse. I suggest you use the time wisely." Chloe smiled from across the room, her hand still curved protectively over the life growing inside her. The life Kelly had prayed for. The life she'd bled for. The life her husband was now celebrating with someone else. Kelly stood on legs that barely held her. The same elevator that had carried her up to this restaurant as a glowing bride 8 years ago now, waited to take her down as a discarded wife. She stepped inside, and the doors closed on everything she'd ever believed about love, about loyalty, about the man who'd promised to cherish her. "Where am I supposed to go?" she whispered to the empty elevator. The city lights blurred through her tears. 40 floors of glass and steel separating her from the ground. Somewhere above her, champagne was being poured. Somewhere above her, her replacement was being toasted. And somewhere deep inside Kelly Douglas, beneath the humiliation and the grief and the crushing weight of being told her body was broken, a spark of something else was beginning to smolder. She didn't know it yet, but Jonathan Douglas had just made the biggest mistake of his carefully calculated life. The elevator doors opened, and Kelly stepped back into the penthouse she'd called home for 8 years. But it didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a crime scene. Her phone buzzed before she could even set down her purse. An email from Jonathan's legal team. The subject line read, "Reminder, prenuptial agreement terms and vacate timeline. 30 days. She had 30 days to erase herself from this life. Kelly moved through the glass-walled apartment like a ghost, pulling clothes from closets, shoving photographs into boxes. Every drawer she opened held memories she couldn't afford to feel right now. The card Jonathan wrote her on their first anniversary, the ultrasound photos from pregnancies that never made it past the first trimester, the fertility supplements she'd been taking religiously, still lined up on the bathroom counter like soldiers in a war she'd already lost. Her phone buzzed again. Another email. Per Section 7.3 of the prenuptial agreement, all jewelry gifted during the marriage remains property of the Douglas estate. Please ensure all items are inventoried before your departure. They wanted the earrings back, the ones she was still wearing. The next 2 weeks taught Kelly exactly how invisible she'd become. Her credit card was declined at the pharmacy when she tried to fill a prescription. The insurance she'd assumed was hers had been tied to Jonathan's company, and someone had already terminated her coverage. Bills from the fertility clinic arrived in thick envelopes, addressed to her, totaling amounts that made her vision blur. She'd thought Jonathan had paid them. He'd told her he'd paid them, but there was her signature on every payment plan, and his name nowhere to be found. Meanwhile, the gossip sites were having a field day. Sources close to the couple say Kelly Douglas had become obsessed with motherhood to an unhealthy degree. Insiders reveal the tech billionaire tried for years to help his struggling wife accept medical reality. Friends worry Kelly's mental state deteriorated after multiple pregnancy losses. Anonymous sources, carefully placed stories, Jonathan's PR team painting her as the unstable ex-wife before she could even catch her breath. Kelly's college friend Marissa offered her the couch. It was supposed to be temporary, a few days, maybe a week, just until Kelly figured out her next step. On the third night, she heard them arguing through the bedroom door. "I didn't sign up for this drama," Marissa's boyfriend hissed. "She's all over the tabloids. What if someone sees her coming in and out of our building? She has nowhere else to go. That's not my problem. She married a billionaire and got nothing? That's suspicious. I don't want her here." Kelly was gone before sunrise, her suitcase rolling quietly down the hallway, shame burning in her chest. The sublet was above a laundromat in a part of Brooklyn she'd never visited during her years as Mrs. Douglas. One room, thin walls, a flickering light in the bathroom that buzzed like an angry wasp. The smell of detergent and mildew seeped through the floorboards at all hours. It cost almost everything she had left. Job interviews went nowhere. HR managers glanced at her resume, 8 years of household management and event coordination, and their expressions shifted. One woman actually said it out loud. "We're looking for candidates without tabloid baggage. I'm sure you understand." Kelly understood perfectly. Nights were the hardest. She kept her wedding ring in the nightstand drawer. Some nights she'd slip it on, remembering who she used to be. Then she'd tear it off, remembering who he'd shown her he really was. Sleep came in fragments, interrupted by Jonathan's voice on a loop. "Some women simply aren't built to be mothers." One night, unable to sleep, Kelly scrolled through her phone. The headlines glowed in the darkness. Jonathan Douglas and fiancée Chloe celebrate miracle pregnancy at intimate gathering. Tech billionaire's new beginning inside his stunning oceanfront engagement party. The washing machines rumbled beneath her floor. The ceiling fan wobbled overhead. And Kelly pressed her face into a pillow that smelled like someone else's fabric softener, crying until there was nothing left. She didn't know it yet, but she was about to hit a bottom so deep, only spite would be strong enough to pull her back out. 3 months later, Kelly barely recognized herself. The woman staring back from the bathroom mirror had hollow cheeks and dark circles carved under her eyes. Her hair hung limp and unwashed. The apartment behind her was a graveyard of unopened bills, rejection emails printed and stacked on the counter, and empty instant noodle cups she couldn't summon the energy to throw away. She'd stopped counting the job applications, stopped hoping for callbacks that never came. The temp agency was her last shot. A small office with fluorescent lighting and a woman in a blazer who smiled too wide and spoke too slowly, like Kelly might shatter if she used her normal voice. Unfortunately, we're not able to place someone with your profile at this time. The woman tilted her head with practiced sympathy. Perhaps you should take some time to focus on your wellness. Self-care is so important during transitions. Kelly heard what she actually meant. You're damaged goods. You're unhireable. You're useless. She walked home in the rain because she couldn't afford the subway fare twice in one day. That evening, her phone rang, a number she didn't recognize. Ms. Douglas, this is Richard Crane from Whitmore and Associates, representing Mr. Douglas. The voice was clipped, professional, bored. We're calling to clarify that any attempt to contest the prenuptial agreement will be met with a vigorous legal response. Mr. Douglas has documented evidence of your emotional instability during the marriage, and we will not hesitate to make that evidence public. Kelly's hand trembled against the phone. You should consider yourself fortunate, the lawyer continued. Mr. Douglas was under no obligation to provide the settlement he offered. We strongly advise you to move forward quietly. The line went dead. Kelly sat in the dark for a long time, listening to the washing machines rumble beneath her feet. She didn't remember deciding to go to the subway station. One moment she was staring at the wall. The next she was standing on a crowded platform, bodies pressing around her, the yellow safety line inches from her toes. A train was coming. She could feel it in the vibration of the concrete, hear it in the growing roar from the tunnel. Jonathan's voice filled her head. Some women simply aren't built to be mothers. You were convenient. Your body is fundamentally broken. The noise grew louder. The platform edge seemed to pull at her. She imagined one step forward. Just one. The pain would stop. The humiliation would end. The headlines would say tragic, and Jonathan would shake his head sadly, and everyone would forget she ever existed. He would win. Completely. Permanently. A hand grabbed her arm and yanked her backward. What are you doing? A woman in scrubs, exhaustion carved into her face, was gripping Kelly's elbow. Hey, look at me! Kelly blinked. The train screamed past, wind whipping her hair. The nurse's expression shifted from anger to something softer as she studied Kelly's hollow eyes. No man gets to decide whether you live or die. You hear me? She squeezed Kelly's arm. Go home. Prove him wrong just by breathing tomorrow. That's all you have to do. Then she was gone, swallowed by the crowd. Back in her apartment, Kelly sat on the floor surrounded by photographs. Her wedding day, vacations she'd smiled through, dinner parties where she'd played the perfect wife. She tore them up one by one until only scraps remained. But she kept one, a photo of herself at 24, a year before she met Jonathan, smiling, hopeful, whole. She pinned it to the wall above her bed, not because she felt hope. She didn't. What she felt was something harder, sharper, uglier. Spite. Jonathan Douglas did not get to be right about her. He did not get to win. She would stay alive just to prove him wrong. It wasn't much, but it was enough to survive one more night. 15 months after Jonathan destroyed her world, Kelly was still alive. Not thriving, not healed, but functioning. She worked part-time at a tiny design studio in Queens, doing basic tasks, resizing logos, formatting documents, nothing glamorous. The pay was modest, but it was honest. In 3 evenings a week, she volunteered at a community kitchen in Brooklyn, partly because she believed in the mission, and partly because volunteers got to take home leftovers. She wasn't proud of needing that, but she wasn't ashamed anymore either. The kitchen was chaos in the best way. Steam rising from massive pots, volunteers bumping elbows and trading jokes, older women who called everyone baby, single parents juggling serving spoons and toddlers, People in recovery working the dish station with quiet focus. Nobody here read gossip blogs. Nobody cared what last name she used to carry. She'd also started seeing a counselor at the community center. Free sessions for people in transition. It wasn't much, just an hour every 2 weeks in a cramped office with mismatched chairs. But slowly she was learning to untangle her worth from Jonathan's words. For the first time in years, Kelly felt invisible in a way that felt like freedom. One Saturday, a broad-shouldered man walked in with a shy teenage girl trailing behind him. He wore a faded FDNY t-shirt stretched across his chest and moved like someone used to navigating tight spaces under pressure. "Ethan!" One of the older volunteers waved him over. "You brought Maya. Good, we need hands on the bread station." Ethan greeted everyone by name. Everyone except Kelly. She noticed. And she noticed the way his eyes flickered with recognition before he looked away. He knew who she was. He'd seen the headlines. But he said nothing, just picked up an apron and got to work. Later, when Kelly struggled to lift a heavy stock pot from the stove, Ethan appeared beside her and took it without comment. No fanfare, no pity in his expression, just a quiet nod and steady hands. Even later, when she thought no one was watching, Kelly slipped some extra rice and vegetables into her bag for tomorrow's lunch. When she got home that night, she found a container of chicken tucked beneath the rice. She knew exactly who had put it there. Over the following weeks, Kelly learned about Ethan in fragments. His sister had died 2 years ago in a luxury high-rise fire. Faulty sprinkler systems, stairwell doors that locked from the wrong side. The developer had cut corners to save money, and 14 people paid for it with their lives. The building was called the Meridian. Kelly's stomach dropped when she heard the name. She remembered Jonathan acquiring that project, remembered him talking about optimization in trimming excess. She'd never asked what that meant. Now she knew. One night after closing, the kitchen nearly empty, Ethan poured 2 cups of burnt coffee and sat down across from Kelly at a side table. "I know who you are," he said quietly. "Recognized you that first day." Kelly stiffened. And nothing," he shrugged. "Everybody here has a story they don't want to tell. Figured you'd share yours if you wanted to." They sat in silence for a moment. Then Ethan spoke again. "I hate that building more than any other building in this city. Some nights I can't sleep because I keep running up those stairs in my head, trying to reach her in time." Kelly's throat tightened. "Some nights I can't sleep either. Different reasons. Same feeling, I think." He nodded slowly. "Yeah, I think so too." They didn't solve anything that night, didn't share their whole histories, just 2 broken people recognizing the same exhausted emptiness in each other. Walking home, Kelly realized something had shifted. For the first time in longer than she could remember, she was replaying a conversation that had nothing to do with Jonathan Douglas. And that felt like the beginning of something. Love didn't arrive like lightning for Kelly and Ethan. It crept in slowly, through small routines neither of them named. Early morning texts about shift schedules. Walking Maya home after her tutoring sessions. Sitting on the community center steps sharing cheap takeout from the place on the corner that gave extra sauce if you asked nicely. Months passed, seasons changed, and somewhere in the ordinary moments, Kelly started looking forward to tomorrow again. One night after the kitchen closed, Ethan finally told her everything. "I was 4 blocks away when the call came in." His voice was steady, but his hands weren't. "The Meridian, 14 people trapped. By the time I got up those stairs, the smoke was so thick I couldn't see my own hands." He stared at the table. "She was on the 9th floor. My sister. I made it to 8 before the ceiling came down. They pulled me out. Told me later she never had a chance. The sprinklers failed. The stairwell doors were locked wrong. The whole building was a death trap dressed up in marble and glass." Kelly reached across the table and covered his hand with hers. "I blamed myself for 2 years," Ethan continued. "Then I learned the developer cut every corner that mattered to save money. And I started blaming men like him instead. Men who build empires on other people's graves." Kelly's throat tightened. She knew exactly the kind of man he meant. That night she told him about the fertility treatments, the miscarriages, the way her ex-husband had used her medical records to paint her as broken, obsessed, disposable. She didn't say Jonathan's name. She wasn't ready, but she told Ethan the truth about what had been done to her body and her heart. He listened without interrupting, and when she finished, he didn't try to fix anything. He just said, "Thank you for trusting me with that." 3 weeks later, Ethan responded to a fire call that went wrong. A floor collapsed. 2 firefighters were briefly trapped. Ethan came out with singed gear and a gash on his forehead that needed stitches. Kelly met him outside the hospital, shaking so hard she could barely stand. "I can't lose someone else," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I can't do it again, Ethan. I'm not strong enough." He pulled her close, his bandaged forehead resting against hers. "You're the strongest person I know." A week later, in the back room of the community kitchen, surrounded by dented pots and the hum of industrial refrigerators, Ethan took her hands. "I'm falling in love with you," he said quietly, "and it terrifies me, because I know what you've been through. I know trusting another man is the last thing you should have to do." Kelly's eyes filled with tears. "I need you to understand something. I may never be able to have children. Doctors called me medically infertile, and I refuse to let anyone tie my worth to motherhood ever again." Ethan nodded slowly. "I want a life with you, Kelly. Even if it's just us and a bunch of rescue dogs and Maya crashing on our couch every weekend. Your courage is enough. Your kindness is enough. You are enough." He pulled a small box from his jacket pocket. Inside was a simple ring. Nothing flashy, nothing extravagant. Just honest. "No secrets," he promised. "No PR spins. Just us, choosing each other anyway." Kelly looked at the ring, then at the man holding it, then at the terrifying, beautiful possibility of trusting again. "Yes," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Yes." She was still afraid. But for the first time in years, she was choosing love with her eyes wide open. They got married on a Tuesday afternoon in a neighborhood park 3 blocks from the community kitchen. Kelly wore a thrifted dress she'd found for $12. Ethan's suit was slightly too big in the shoulders. Maya stood as their only official witness, holding wildflowers she'd picked that morning. The reception was a potluck in the community center. Ethan's firefighter crew brought enough food to feed 50 people. The kitchen volunteers decorated with streamers and hand-painted signs. Someone's grandmother made a 3-tier cake that leaned slightly to the left but tasted like heaven. It was nothing like the elaborate wedding Kelly had the first time. It was better. Married life was imperfect and wonderful. Their apartment was small. Finances were tight. They argued about dishes and whose turn it was to take out the trash. But there was laughter too. Late nights on the couch watching bad movies, inside jokes that made no sense to anyone else, the quiet peace of waking up next to someone who actually wanted to be there. Maya started coming over on weekends, slowly relaxing around Kelly, eventually asking for help with homework and advice about friends. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. 6 months into the marriage, Kelly started feeling wrong. Constant nausea, bone-deep exhaustion, smells that made her gag. She blamed stress. She blamed the long hours at the design studio. She blamed everything except the possibility she couldn't bear to consider. Maya noticed first. "You've been sick every morning for 2 weeks, the teenager said, blocking the bathroom door with a dollar store pregnancy test in her hand. "I'm not leaving until you take this." "Maya, take the test." Kelly's hands trembled as she opened the box. 3 minutes later, she stared at 2 pink lines and felt her entire world tilt sideways. Not joy, terror. She knew what happened when she got pregnant. She knew how this story ended. At the clinic, Kelly gripped Ethan's hand so tight her knuckles went white. The ultrasound tech moved the wand slowly, frowning at the screen. Then she went quiet. Then she called in the doctor. Kelly stopped breathing. Here it comes. The bad news. The loss. The confirmation that her body would fail her again. The doctor studied the monitor for a long moment. Then she turned to Kelly with wide eyes. "Mrs. Blake, there are 3 heartbeats." The room spun. Kelly heard the words but couldn't process them. 3? "Triplets," the doctor confirmed. "You're carrying triplets." Ethan made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a gasp. His hand squeezed hers, and when Kelly looked at him, his eyes were wet. "We'll figure it out," he whispered. "Whatever comes. Together." A specialist reviewed her old medical records the following week. Your endometriosis was mismanaged, she explained gently. The aggressive protocols you underwent before, combined with chronic stress, likely reduced your chances significantly. In a lower stress environment with proper care, your body is responding very differently. Kelly sat with that truth for a long time. She hadn't been broken. She'd been broken down. That night, Kelly stood alone in the small room they'd started calling the nursery. Empty walls, no furniture yet, just possibility. She placed her hand on her still flat stomach and whispered into the silence. I don't know if I can do this. Her voice cracked. But I'm going to fight for you, all three of you, as hard as I fought to stay alive. She didn't have hope, not yet, but she had something stronger. She had the stubborn refusal to let fear win. Kelly's pregnancy became a battlefield. By week 20, she was on partial bed rest. By week 24, it was full bed rest with home nurse visits. Her feet swelled until she couldn't recognize them. Her blood pressure climbed no matter how carefully she ate. Every cramp sent her spiraling. Every quiet moment between kicks made her hold her breath until she felt movement again. 3 lives, all depending on a body she'd spent years believing was broken. Ethan never missed an appointment. He showed up to ultrasound still in uniform, smelling like smoke, eyes red from 24-hour shifts. He fell asleep in plastic waiting room chairs and woke up the second Kelly's name was called. He held her hand through every blood draw, every scary measurement, every moment the doctors exchanged glances they thought she didn't notice. Together, they attended parenting classes and NICU preparation courses. They practiced infant CPR on plastic dolls. They learned choking responses until their hands moved automatically. They studied how to advocate for premature babies, how to read monitors, how to stay calm when everything felt like chaos. We might need this, Ethan said quietly after one class. Kelly nodded. She prayed they wouldn't, but she memorized every technique anyway. At 31 weeks, everything went wrong. A routine blood pressure check spiked dangerously high. Lab results came back alarming. Within hours, Kelly was admitted to the hospital, and within hours after that, doctors were prepping her for an emergency C-section. The operating room was chaos. Voices overlapping, monitors blaring. Kelly couldn't see anything past the surgical curtain. But she felt Ethan's hand gripping hers, his voice steady in her ear, even though his fingers were shaking. You're doing great. They're almost here. Stay with me. And then, a cry, tiny, angry, alive. Then another, then a third. Avery, Mason, Lily. 3 voices piercing through the noise, announcing their arrival to a world that had once told their mother she would never hear this sound. The NICU became their second home. The triplets were impossibly small, connected to wires and tubes that made them look more machine than human. Kelly stood at their isolettes for hours, terrified that one wrong breath, one wrong touch, would break something irreparably. Maya visited every weekend, pressing her hand against the glass and whispering encouragement to cousins she'd already decided to protect. You being here is medicine, one of the NICU nurses told her gently. Your voice, your touch, even the milk you pump, it all matters. So Kelly showed up, every single day. Days turned into weeks. The triplets gained weight, ounces that felt like victories. Kelly moved from paralyzing fear to practical routines, skin-to-skin time, bottle practice, changing diapers so small they fit in her palm, tracking every gram of progress on charts she kept by her bedside. Her body had done this. Her body had carried 3 lives and brought them into the world. For the first time, she didn't see it as broken. She saw it as a survivor. 6 weeks later, the discharge papers were signed. Kelly buckled 3 car seats into Ethan's beat-up truck while nurses watched from the hospital entrance. Avery slept. Mason fussed. Lily stared at the ceiling like she was already judging the world. As the hospital doors closed behind them, Kelly leaned into the back seat and whispered to her children, the world told me I'd never be your mother, that I wasn't built for this, that my body would fail. She touched each tiny hand. And yet, here we are. 2 years later, Kelly's life looked nothing like the one she'd lost. Their apartment was chaos. Crayon marks on walls they'd stopped trying to clean. Toys scattered across every surface, Cheerios crushed into the carpet, and Ethan, half asleep on the couch at 7 in the evening, with Avery and Mason sprawled across his chest and Lily drooling contentedly on his shoulder. It was messy. It was exhausting. It was everything Kelly never thought she'd have. She balanced freelance design work from home with part-time shifts at the studio, scheduling calls during nap times, and deadlines around pediatrician appointments. The community kitchen was still their social hub. The triplets had a dozen honorary aunts and uncles who spoiled them with attention every weekend. Life wasn't perfect, but it was full. On an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, Kelly sorted through the mail while the triplets fought over a stuffed elephant in the living room. Bills, junk, grocery flyer, and then a thick, cream-colored envelope. Embossed, elegant. A logo she recognized instantly. Jonathan's personal brand. The one his PR team had designed after the divorce. Her stomach dropped. Inside was an invitation. Gold lettering. Oceanfront venue. Jonathan and Chloe Douglas cordially invite you to celebrate their grand wedding celebration and the joy of their growing family. And at the bottom in Jonathan's handwriting, thought you might want to see what a real legacy looks like. Hope you can be happy for me now that nature has finally corrected what it couldn't provide before. Kelly laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. Then she tossed the envelope in the trash and went back to separating the children from their stuffed animal war. But the words lodged under her skin. That night, after the triplets were finally asleep and the apartment was quiet, Kelly fished the invitation out of the trash. She sat at the kitchen table and stared at it until Ethan found her there. "What's that?" She handed it to him without a word. Ethan read it slowly, his jaw tightened. Then he set it down and looked at her. "What do you want to do?" "I don't know." Kelly rubbed her temples. "Part of me wants to burn it. Part of me wants to show up just to prove I survived. Would going reopen wounds? Or close them?" She didn't have an answer, not yet. Over the following weeks, Kelly talked through it in therapy, sat with it during quiet moments after the kids went to bed, examined her own heart with brutal honesty. She didn't want revenge. She didn't crave Jonathan's attention or approval. She didn't need him to apologize or suffer. What she wanted was simpler than that. She wanted to stand in front of him once, not as the discarded wife he remembered, but as the woman she'd become without him. She wanted to close that chapter completely, then never think about him again. Ethan listened to all of it. And when she finished, he said only one thing. "If you go, I go. And if anyone comes at you with cruelty, they go through me first." On a Thursday evening, while Mason shrieked about a spilled juice cup and Lily chased Avery with a crayon, Kelly sat down at the laptop. She pulled up the RSVP page, typed in her information, party of 5. Her hand hovered over the submit button, then she clicked send. Behind her, the chaos continued. Juice dripping, children laughing, Ethan sighing as he reached for paper towels. Kelly smiled. She was ready. The coastal resort looked like something from a magazine. White tents billowing in the ocean breeze, flower walls arranged for perfect photos, a string quartet playing softly as influencers posed with champagne flutes. Guests in designer outfits murmured about Jonathan's incredible comeback story and Chloe's glow. Everything curated, everything controlled, everything fake. Kelly arrived quietly, simple dress, comfortable shoes. Ethan beside her in a dark suit, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else, but refusing to let her walk in alone. And the triplets, Avery, Mason, and Lily, now 2 years old, in matching outfits, clutching their favorite stuffed animals, blissfully unaware of the history surrounding them. Heads turned as they found seats near the back. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Kelly felt the weight of recognition in strangers' eyes. The barren wife from the headlines, suddenly appearing with 3 children. She kept her gaze forward and her spine straight. Jonathan noticed her mid-ceremony. He was halfway through his rehearsed vows, voice smooth and practiced, when his eyes drifted to the back rows and locked onto Kelly. His words stumbled. His composure cracked, just slightly, just enough for the microphones to catch. Chloe noticed. Her smile tightened. Her hand gripped his arm a little harder. Jonathan recovered, pushing through the rest of his vows. but his eyes kept darting back. To Kelly, to the three small children sitting beside her, to the broad-shouldered man whose arm rested protectively around her shoulders. The I do came out strained. A few guests exchanged glances. Phones appeared, recording. Everyone sensed something was about to happen. At the reception, Jonathan found her. He cornered Kelly behind a floral arch, away from the crowd but not far enough. His voice was low, controlled, furious. "Whose children are those?" Kelly met his gaze without flinching. "Mine. Don't play games with me." His jaw tightened. "Did you steal embryos? Is this some elaborate scheme to humiliate me at my own wedding?" "They're Ethan's children, Jonathan. Biologically his. Conceived naturally." Kelly's voice shook, but she held steady. "A specialist reviewed my records after we divorced. My condition was mismanaged. The aggressive treatments, the constant stress, it made everything worse. My body wasn't broken. It was broken down by the life I was living with you." Jonathan's face went pale. "That's impossible. The doctors said—" "The doctors you paid said what you wanted to hear." Before he could respond, a scream cut through the reception. "Mason!" Kelly spun around. Her son was turning red, hands clawing at his throat, eyes wide with terror. A well-meaning guest stood nearby, horrified, holding a bowl of grapes. The music stopped. Guests froze. Kelly and Ethan moved as one. She dropped to her knees. Ethan positioned himself behind Mason, hands already finding the right placement. The techniques they'd practiced in NICU classes, the ones they'd prayed they'd never need, took over automatically. One thrust, two, three. A grape flew out. Mason gasped, coughed, and then began to wail, the most beautiful sound Kelly had ever heard. She pulled him into her arms, tears streaming down her face, murmuring comfort against his hair, while Ethan wrapped himself around both of them. The entire reception watched in stunned silence. They just witnessed real parenting, calm under pressure, instinct born from preparation and love. And standing 10 feet away, frozen in his expensive suit, was Jonathan Douglas, useless, shaken, and completely irrelevant. Kelly didn't even look at him. She had her son. She had her family. That was all that mattered. The videos spread within hours. Jonathan's faltering vows, his shaken composure when he spotted Kelly, and most damning of all, the choking incident. Side-by-side clips showed Ethan and Kelly moving with calm, practiced precision, while Jonathan stood frozen, useless, watching someone else's child fight for breath at his own wedding. The comments wrote themselves. Then came the leak. A medical insider, identity protected, revealed that Jonathan Douglas had long-standing fertility issues, borderline low sperm count, and motility that doctors had flagged years ago. Not infertile, but challenged. The same diagnosis that might have explained his and Kelly's struggles, if he'd ever admitted it instead of placing all the blame on her. Commentators connected the dots immediately. The man who'd publicly destroyed his ex-wife for her broken body had been hiding his own medical truth the entire time. His entire narrative collapsed overnight. Investors questioned his judgment, board members demanded answers, and Chloe, realizing she'd been lied to about his diagnosis and watching his obsession with Kelly play out publicly, quietly consulted a divorce attorney. Kelly didn't watch the fallout. She went home, wiped peanut butter handprints off walls, rushed to daycare pickup, sent invoices for design projects, laughed at Ethan's tired dad jokes over reheated leftovers. The luxury resort faded into a strange weekend she was relieved to leave behind. 3 weeks later, Jonathan appeared outside her building. No entourage, no cameras, just a man in an expensive coat, looking smaller than she remembered. "Can we talk?" His voice was quiet. "Please." Ethan's jaw tightened, but Kelly touched his arm. 5 minutes. In the lobby. She sat across from Jonathan on a worn bench, while Ethan watched from the elevator bank, close enough to intervene, far enough to give her space. "I hid my diagnosis," Jonathan said finally. "For years. I couldn't accept that I might be the problem. So I made you the problem instead." He stared at his hands. "It was easier to blame you than to face my own fear of being inadequate." Kelly waited. She didn't rescue him from the silence. I'm sorry, he continued, the words halting, awkward. For what I said, for how I treated you, for all of it. She studied him for a long moment. The man who had once held her entire world in his hands looked hollowed out now, defeated. I forgave you a long time ago, Jonathan. Her voice was calm. Not for your sake, for mine. I refuse to carry you in my head any longer. He looked up, something like hope flickering in his eyes. But you will never meet my children, Kelly continued. You will never be part of their lives. That door is closed. Permanently. She stood. I hope you find peace. I genuinely do. But you'll have to find it without me. She walked back to Ethan without looking back. Years passed. The triplets started kindergarten. Backpacks too big, smiles even bigger. Ethan grumbled good-naturedly about being the older dad at school pickup. Kelly spoke occasionally at women's support groups about rebuilding after financial and emotional abuse. One afternoon, she came across a small business article mentioning Jonathan stepping back from public life after health issues and personal challenges. Something about philanthropic work, a quieter existence. She felt nothing sharp, maybe a distant hope that he was genuinely becoming better, for his own sake, not hers. That evening, Kelly sat on a playground bench watching her 3 children race toward Ethan, who roared dramatically and pretended to be a monster chasing them. Avery shrieked with laughter. Mason tried to climb his father's back. Lily declared herself the hero who would save everyone. Kelly smiled. Her worth had never been about Jonathan's last name, his money, his verdict on her body. The woman he called incapable of motherhood had become exactly the mother, and the woman she was always meant to be, without him. Father, bless this beautiful family watching right now. Bless those who've been told they'll never succeed. Prove those lies wrong. Bless the strength it takes to rebuild when your world breaks. And bless the journey from penthouse to nowhere and back to everything that matters. Amen. Hello, my beautiful family. Thank you for witnessing Kelly's story. If you believe in the power of redemption and resilience, please like this video and subscribe to the Penthouse Diaries for more stories that remind you what they destroy, you can rebuild, and better. Share this with someone who needs to know they're not broken. I'll see you in the next one.